January 6th at the Capitol is comparable to the American Civil War.
What the Republicans are doing, the House Republicans, is beyond crazy. To be so far under the thumb of Donald J. Trump, letting the most dishonest president in American history dictate the prerogatives of the Republican Party will be its demise. We all know there needs to be a thorough and honest accounting of what took place on January 6th. The greatest attempted insurrection since the Civil War.
Oh, it was an insurrection. So how many of the participants in that insurrection have been charged with insurrecting, with sedition, with treason? 0. By the Biden Justice Department. Said they've been charged with effectively trespassing. But you can still see the similarities. During the Civil War, more than 500,000 people were shot to death. On January 6th, one person was shot to death, and she turned out to be an unarmed Trump voter gunned down without explanation by the Capitol Hill police. But other than that, basically the same thing. Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio made a similarly sweeping and overheated point. He didn't mention Gettysburg or Shiloh. But Ryan did point out that anyone who votes against this commission is responsible for climate change.
You have people scaling the Capitol, hitting the Capitol Police with lead pipes across the head, and we can't get bipartisanship. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need 2 political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them.
A thug, a screamer, hysterical, but apparently he made a compelling argument. 35 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted for that commission yesterday. They joined what Tim Ryan described as the party that's living in reality, the party that wears surgical masks outside, the party that thinks it's possible to change your biological sex, the reality party. One of the Republicans who voted with the reality party is Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. I support a bipartisan January 6th commission, he wrote on Twitter. This should not be about party politics or become a partisan fight. Well, of course not. And you wouldn't expect partisanship or party politics from Democrats in the House of Representatives. Pretty funny. To be fair, Adam Kinzinger is widely understood to be among the slowest members of Congress, Mazie Hirono level slow. So it's entirely possible he had no idea what he was saying when he wrote it. Maybe he didn't even write it. What's harder to explain are the several Republicans in the Senate, including Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Susan Collins of Maine, who have suggested they too will support this commission. Unlike Adam Kinzinger, Collins and Cassidy can read without moving their lips. They know what's in this legislation. The bill that the House passed yesterday was taken directly from the law that established the 9/11 Commission almost 20 years ago. That legislation instructed Congress to, quote, investigate and report to the President and Congress on its findings, conclusions, and recommendations for corrective measures that can be taken to prevent acts of terrorism. That was the 9/11 law. The new legislation that would create a January 6th commission demands the very same. Congress must, quote, investigate and report to the President and Congress on its findings, conclusions, and recommendations for corrective measures that could be taken to prevent future acts of targeted violence and domestic terrorism. Virtually identical language. That's not accidental. This is the new war on terror. But this war isn't aimed at Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any foreign power. This war is aimed at you and anyone else who stands in the way of the Democratic Party's agenda. Sean Davis understands this. He's the co-founder of The Federalist. We're happy to have him join us tonight. Sean, thanks so much for coming on. So before we get to the things that we would like to know about January 6th, and there are quite a few of them, the 2 red flags in my mind are, one, the fact that Adam Kinzinger is mindlessly supporting it, so of course it's probably dumb. But 2, and more to the point, the hysteria, the overheated rhetoric, the clearly disproportionate, almost lunatic descriptions of what happened on January 6th tell you that this isn't really a bipartisan effort to get to the truth, is it?
No, in fact, it looks a lot more to me like Mueller 2.0. Just as the Mueller probe in 2017 was based on the lie of Russian collusion, which didn't exist. And it was based on that because they wanted to be able to get Trump, and they wanted to be able to have all the law enforcement powers that come with the special counsel to go after his people, go after him, accuse him of collusion and obstruction of justice. This new commission is no different. It's Congress. It wants all of the law enforcement powers that DOJ usually has to subpoena, to indict, maybe even to imprison if people don't do what Congress wants them to, if they're contemptuous of Congress, heaven forbid. And the whole thing is political nonsense. It's meant to give them something to hang on to for the next 2 years, heading into 2022, that they can use to demonize their opposition, to shut their opposition down, and make sure that they have no one challenge them heading into the next election.
Back up 3 sentences. This gives Democrats in the Congress effectively police powers, as they had during the Mueller probe. I mean, that seems like the essence of it. This empowers partisans to go after their political opponents.
Right. At least with the Mueller probe, you had it somewhat outsourced to an agency that has all kinds of rules and procedures, many of which were never followed, which is how you end up with completely fabricated FISA warrants. But they're taking upon for themselves those powers. And I think the most difficult one is really subpoena. Who are they going to subpoena? What limits are there to their power to compel testimony? Can they just call in any MAGA grandma who happened to be within 500 miles of the Capitol and harangue her and demand that she sit before their inquisition? Judging by their rhetoric, I don't think they're acknowledging any limit on their powers, and that's actually really scary. And if you care about democracy and the integrity of it, I don't see how you can possibly allow something like this to happen when we know how Democrats handle things. Just look at Brett Kavanaugh.
I'm a little confused even by the public claims of Democrats that we need more power to get to the bottom of this. As far as I understand, we've had the most vigorous law enforcement response to what happened on January 6th that I've seen really since 9/11. I mean, you've got dozens of people sitting in solitary confinement tonight for the crime of trespassing. The NSA, CIA, FBI, U.S. attorneys across the country all mobilized in response to January 6th. So we haven't done enough?
Apparently not. And what's really fascinating to me is I thought Democrats had already solved this little puzzle back in January when they impeached Trump over it and blamed him for inciting it. What else is there to investigate?
Right.
They told us it was all his fault. So what are they doing now?
Yeah, this has got nothing to do, by the way, with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not in office anymore. It has to do with the rest of us and the country, and that's who they're going after, not Trump. Sean Davis, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you for that.
Thank you.